for your patience, and thank you everyone for participating today. This is a series of ongoing webinars we've been doing at Grapevines, mainly talking about sales execution in beverage alcohol. Today's topic, takes us a little bit outside that, although it is still very related, and it's a little bit more general company management. But we have a great group of panelists, and we're talking about leveraging managed services to get the most out of IT spends. These gentlemen all represent kind of mid-size or small wine or spirits companies, and their experiences are that, we talk about the range of doing everything in-house yourself as an IT department, and what sort of things over time you tend to think other people can do better and maybe leverage some scale there. So with that, these are our panelists. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. This slide kind of gives you where they work, and they're going to go through a bit of background. And while they do it, and we'll go in this order here on the slide, while they do it, they're going to answer this question. So a little bit of background on themselves, and then also talk about what it is in their opinions and in their backgrounds you should consider, outsourcing or leveraging an outside vendor for, versus keeping in-house and, having in-house staff tackle or in-house tech tackle. So with that, I think, Tim, you are up first. Tim and I used to be coworkers. We worked together in a past life, and it's great to be, and he's a client of ours now, so it's great to be working with him again. Anyway, you there, Tim?
I am. Hi. Name is Tim Hay. As it says there, I'm the Vice President of Finance and Operations at Pahlmeyer and Wayfair Wineries. We're headquartered in St. Helena. I've been in the wine industry for over 12, 13 years at various sized companies, ranging from some of the big guys down to now a family-owned winery. Plugging into this whole conversation, my experience is with a organizational structure that has 100% of the IT needs of the company internally, to the point where I am now, where we pretty much have everything outsourced at 100%. And I think that's where it really gets down to is really what's the focus of your business. And for us, our focus is making wine and not managing a number of employees that are really outside that focal point. And so for our needs as a small business, we still have the same needs of help desk, website, certain ERP needs and what have you. And for us, it really allows us to better manage, I think, the cost of IT to have this process completely outsourced.
Thanks, Tim. That was great. Stephen, you next.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Stephen Kirschenmann. I'm a sales and marketing analyst for about 2.5 years now at Clos Du Val Wine Company. Prior to that, I did any kind of combination of sales, analytics, and day-to-day IT needs for a mid-sized wholesale company as well as a commercial photography company. So managing leveraging your managed services at Clos Du Val, I'm kind of in the middle of the three panelists here today, and what we really look at is what's your geolocation, and what is the needs of your staff? What are your needs today versus the needs of in the future? Clos Du Val is going through a lot of changes right now, a bit of an evolution going on here. So our IT needs are constantly changing, and what we're moving from is similar to what Tim said, was having everything on site, slowly evolving to everything being hosted or managed off-site for us. And I think we found that having someone like myself here to kind of handle the in-between day-to-day needs has been a big advantage.
Terrific. Thank you, Stephen. Andre, you have a different perspective, right?
I do indeed. So hi, everybody. My name is Andre Preoteasa. I started just the other month, the first and only IT services company for the beverage alcohol industry. In fact, we're exclusively for the beverage alcohol industry. Prior to that, I spent 9 years as Castle Brands IT director. Castle Brands is a U.S. supplier, mostly spirits. We did do wine for a short period. And that's where I was in-house, and now I advocate to put a lot of stuff outsourced, ideally to my company. And to answer the question of what should be outsourced, how you leverage your managed services, I think you can have a good balance in between the two. I'm biased, of course, because I'm here to tell you should outsource it to me, but in reality, keeping things in-house, if it's strategic to your business or to a larger goal, you should consider keeping it in-house. All the so-called boring stuff, email, server management, file management, that kind of stuff, that's not so strategic to achieving a goal, and that stuff should always be outsourced. If you have a large company, for example, and you have a warehouse and a lot of interesting software, you may want to have someone in-house doing that, because that would be strategic if you're going to be offloading and unloading. So there's a good balance, and I'm excited to talk about it with this great company, Grapevines, and these two gentlemen, Steve and Tim, who I just met the other week.
Thank you. Terrific, Andre. Okay, so moving on. The next sort of question we want to ask each of our panelists is, if they all agreed to some extent there's some stuff that's appropriate to put outside. Like, I didn't hear anyone say that you should, in 2017, be running your own email server, for example. If you're going to put some stuff outside, what do you look for in that vendor? And once you've chosen a vendor, how do you manage them effectively, and how do you get the most out of it over time? So I don't know if we need to go in a particular order, guys.
Well, I'll jump in here. This is Tim. I think in an outside vendor, from our perspective, we have roughly 20 individuals that use computers, so we definitely have the need for a help desk presence with the various things. Managing email accounts, as we board people, somebody forgets their password, etc. And so for us, it's really trying to find a local presence, because of where we're physically located. It just helps us a lot. Our needs are to have somebody come on site occasionally with our phone system. We have utilize a VoIP system, and inherently you have the hardware issues that we just really don't want to learn ourselves. And again, we're on a server environment, and as you have all the server rights, it just makes it a lot easier for us to have that as an outsourced relationship and partnership. With that said, though, there's also a tremendous cost you can incur by just having this outsourced by, say, a hired gun or something like that. So really, it's trying to find a vendor that can partner with you. And partnership not only means them telling you, like, hey, this is what you should do to save costs, them listening to you, them asking a lot of questions and trying to really understand your scope of business, what your goals are, what your strategic needs are, as Andre was discussing. And really, I think both parties having reasonable expectations. At the end of the day, Pahlmeyer makes wine. That's our focus 100%. So our IT provider, they should have 100% focus on our IT needs, but we also got to understand that we're not their only customer. And part of that is just, trying to set the stage and having, clear rules of engagement, how we're going to interact with each other, what triggers a billable event, how does the service level agreement cover our needs, etc. So I think really it's just starting off finding a person for us specifically that's local, that's going to have the time to spend with us to understand our needs, and really bring value to the whole equation, not just provide a need.
Thanks, Tim. Stephen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very much the same situations. One thing I think that Tim left off is references, specifically industry references, to kind of point towards Andre a bit, how he's focusing specifically on a single industry and the unique needs of the unique IT needs within this industry. at Clos Du Val, we've used a few vendors that were not super specific to wine industry, and it ultimately resulted in a failure. So industry knowledge is a top 3 priority for me.
I'll be asking you more about that failure later. We got a slide on. So you're saying there are some specific stuff for wine companies like wine club, e-com, tasting room, production,
Certainly.
wine production, very common tools like winemaker database or AMS or whatever they are. Having some familiarity with that tech is a big advantage.
Right, and just some of the legal restrictions, different tax rates. You don't want to go and start a relationship and have to explain to your vendor the difference between a 9-liter and a physical case. So if that's happening, you're probably starting off on the wrong foot there.
Andre, I bet you bring again a different perspective, right?
Yeah, and Tim and Steven said pretty much a lot of what I wanted to say. The key to this is, it's really with any vendor. You want to make sure that you set expectations. You want to make sure that they understand your needs. You understand their needs. I think Tim said it great when he said that, we have to realize that we're not their only customer. So when you have somebody in-house, they work for you and they only work for you. I think with IT vendors, some of the important things to look for is how they communicate with you. Is it all digital based? If so, how? Are they relying on email? Are they relying on their own proprietary ticketing system? Will they come see you in person? How do you communicate? Because that human element, as with any relationship, is maybe not the most important thing. You want to make sure that they're knowledgeable, but it's really the lubrication of the relationship. You're going to get mad at your vendor. Your vendor will probably get mad at you. And being able to resolve this stuff quickly is key, So, when I was in-house IT director, I worked with a lot of IT vendors, and I used to ask them towards the end of meeting them, will I ever see you again? And they would kind of look at me funny. I'd say, well, will I see you, or are you, the boss, and we just talked about, our whole relationship, and you're going to be sending seemingly random people into my office.
You're going to have that conversation over and over again.
Yeah, nobody likes repeating themselves. And with IT is one of those things where philosophically it's all the same. So unfortunately, some IT companies will approach the problem all in the same way, which means all their employees will approach it in the same way, and they won't communicate with each other. So, I can talk a lot, and we'll keep this short, but basically, you want to make sure that you can communicate well and that they're part of your team. They may not be strategic, but IT is absolutely critical. 2 days without any IT services, including your internet, is basically 2 wasted days.
On that note, were any of you affected by the Amazon Web Services outage 2 days ago?
Fortunately not.
Yeah, Pahlmeyer we weren't, no.
It's just interesting, and I wonder if I read in defense of Amazon, they have far exceeded their 99.999% uptime or whatever their commitment is over the years, and of course they get a lot of publicity when they go down. And it's I was just wondering, and this is a little off script, we didn't have it here, but does it make you think any differently about outsourcing or putting stuff in the cloud or the web or anything, or do you just kind of say, I get it, everyone's down every once in a while?
Yeah, that's kind of an expectation that you have to have. Everybody has business and service interruptions. The big storms we've had here on the West Coast the last month, our tasting room was closed. Stuff happens, unfortunately.
Right. I think to add on to part of this with there's the expectation. I think a lot of it is this is an area that most business owners, business managers inherit in a small business. So they're not IT professionals. I do not know the ins and outs of the IT world. So you got to learn as you go, and that's where you have to lean on your vendors. But you also have to realize the level of information that these IT folks have on you can access. I mean, they're managing your data, so it's a very intimate relationship in that regard. So I think a lot, from the rules of engagement is you have to understand that piece of the equation and not just look at this as just, let me find a low-cost guy and just kind of, like an electrician or something like that that's just going to come in, replace some conduit, some wiring, and they're out the door. This is going to be something that's ongoing and somebody that you can lean on for those types of situations. Where we're located in St. Helena, this isn't a hub of like a Silicon Valley where you have a ton of redundancy and what have you. You have one or two providers out here really of any size. And so it's, if they're down, they're down. It doesn't necessarily mean that your web page is down from our customers, but it does mean that we can't go access it because our web, our internet is down. So, you have to just roll with the punches and some of that and understand geographically where you're at and what tools you have to work with.
This is Andre. I'd like to jump in real quick on the Amazon. Indeed, Amazon has far surpassed their agreement. What's interesting about what we in IT call a hiccup, when you have an outage like that or just a temporary problem, is that so many people don't realize that many of your favorite apps, from Uber to the weather app, sits on someone else's infrastructure. And when that person's infrastructure goes down, all those apps go down. In the beverage alcohol industry, there's really no reason to be building there's very little reason to have to be building some sort of money-making app on someone else's infrastructure, because frankly, only the really big companies will invest in that sort of stuff, like Pernod or Diageo, where they'll have an app and it'll be very expensive and very, part of their marketing. And that's not critical to their business. So if that goes down for a few hours, not a big deal. But you may have your email you certainly have your email on someone else's infrastructure. But I'll tell you this, Amazon's issue is a total anomaly. And those companies, a couple of these outages a year, and people will lose confidence, and they'll just go to somewhere else.
Yeah, it's more of a confidence issue than it is anything else, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like your local police department. If there's a bunch of muggings in your town, you lose confidence and you start asking questions, and you can't go to another police department, but you can certainly put the pressure on them. I know people that have worked at Amazon and Google, and the security, the pressure they have for maintaining a secure and reliable system is crazy, paramount. I mean,
yeah, it'd be very hard to match on your own dime.
Even
if you're a company like Coca-Cola or Chevron, you couldn't match what they do. And it was amazing to me to see how much and how many companies rely on Amazon's infrastructure, because it seemed like half the internet was down for a few hours there. So anyway, we should move on from that. I think you started to drift into this, Tim. It was perfect setup. What are some examples of successes or failures that you've had in taking stuff outside?
This is Tim. I'll jump in on this one. I think from a small business perspective, successes are just when your employees, when you really don't hear back from internally grumbles about the service providing, the help desk opportunities and what have you. And I think that, from me at Pahlmeyer, that's what I look at as, is this a successful relationship? Is there expediency and a help desk ticket and what have you for the end user? And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, is provide our staff with a resource when we utilize, and I'm talking, not some of these managed service providers per se, but coming in and managing our IT. But failure is one of those things, as Andre said, you're down for 2 days and you notice it. And we actually had an example like that last summer. We had an IT provider. Everything was outlined in the service level agreement, how the things were going to be backed up, what have you. We were in an interesting environment where we had a Mac server that was backing up to a NAS server for extra capacity and what have you, and come to find out that our Mac server crashes and it was not backing up to the NAS. And this was all things outlined in our service agreement was, they would be maintaining these things, and we were literally, had no server access, so we had very little information for a week, and it took a long time. We learned a lot about what our backups process was, and these were key pieces that we entrusted to a third party, and the reflection on that is that they were good at IT, but they weren't good at being a partner, and they weren't local, and we didn't have the FaceTime with them. And so for me, there was a lot of learning from a tremendous failure that we had to work through with somebody that caused the problem, in our opinion, because of lack of backing up and what have you. So you kind of grow from that, and back to my earlier point that I'm not a professional in this. This isn't my area of expertise, but it is something that I quickly learn at, and now I'm much better versed. So I think overall, we learn from our failures, and in the IT world, from my experience, successes are when you really don't hear much from the end users, meaning our staff out there that's on their computers all day. As long as they're getting the help they need, those are areas of success from my perspective.
Yeah, SLAs are great until you have no data, right? And the provider just was like, yeah, okay, I violated the SLA. What are you going to do about it?
And you still get invoices. It's really one of those things you really have no repercussion in that. It's like you can't cut bait at that point and go to another provider. You really have to work through the problem with them, knowing that you're going to be very frustrated and you're still going to get a bill. And so it's and an increased bill because now you're on emergency time. So yeah, that unfortunately, I think we learn more from our failures and our successes. But in the world of IT, it's you try to learn from other people's failures more so than your own. Was my experience.
I know it's a good analogy. Stephen or Andre, anything to share?
So I kind of briefly touched on it earlier, but essentially I was brought into the company to help implement a Salesforce org for Clos Du Val, and somebody had already selected a vendor by the time I had joined and got up to speed. And essentially what we were trying to do at the time that we weren't quite aware was that we were trying to build grapevines manually, and this partner was not what we needed. And looking back at it, it's hindsight's 20/20. Did we have an SLA? No. Did we ask them who are they going to call when they have problems? Well, nobody really. It's just me and one other person. Okay. How much industry experience do you have? You're only our second winery. So, you just kind of, it was just kind of failure after failure on partner selection, we've moved on to a new vendor now, as we know, and we're with Grapevines. But it just reinforces what we mentioned earlier about making sure you have the right partner.
Thank you, Andre. Go ahead, Andre.
So Tim and Stephen pretty much said it best. And I was before I started Drinks Technology, I was IT director. And as I said, I worked with IT companies. So I was on both sides of the fence. And indeed, success is when everything is working. And that's the perspective that a business owner wants. Everything's working. I hired you to get everything to work. That's good. And in my mind, that's the bare minimum. That's a grade C. You want everything to work, great, but you want to add value. IT is such a important part of a company. It's so, there's privacy concerns, there's data integrity, there's all these things that if they're not done right, they could really do far more than just give you a headache. I don't think it would crush your business, but if you're on a budget, which everybody is, it could definitely cost you a lot of money. So the way I like to look at it, and again, I've been on both sides of the fence, is how are they adding value? Are they doing more than the basics? You have a service level agreement, great, but that's the bare minimum. You want them to be a partner. You want them to come to you and say, you know what, I was checking some things out, and I think you'd do better if we did this or that. And they don't charge you for that because it's in their interest to provide more than just the service level agreement, because then you can go to anybody. I mean, look at plumbers and electricians. You know, for the most part, you can go to any plumber, any electrician. They're certified. You know, and that's one thing about IT that's not regulated. So you really don't know. As Steven said, you know, where are you going to get support if you don't have it? You can't just go to any IT company, at least not so quickly, and you know, with great flexibility. So you can even ask people questions. How do you provide value? Which is kind of a tricky question. You know, I used to love it when the IT companies I worked with at Castle Brands would just randomly email me and say, hey, I want to chat with you for 20 minutes about something. And I would always write back, are you going to charge me? And they would say, no, no, no. I just want to tell you, I think you can make your business or your life a little easier. And which means they were thinking about me, and that's real success. As far as examples of failure, I think Tim hit it on the head with a backup that should have been done and wasn't being done. Those stories are I hear them too much, and that's just you know, a vendor being lazy. You know, taking for granted the relationship they have with a winery by saying, yeah, we're doing it, and keep your fingers crossed. You know, it's like driving without your seatbelt.
Safe to say, no matter how good your disaster recovery plan is, if you never test, your plan is sketchy.
It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's just on paper, you know?
Right.
All right, guys. We've kind of filled our half hour. We can take a couple more minutes here for Q&A. We do have one question that's come in the audience. If you want to ask more, they are welcome. And the question is, can you make technology sourcing decisions that make leveraging managed services easier?
I'll jump in on this. This is Tim to start. Yeah, I mean, absolutely yes. I think with cloud-based services, this day and age, you know, opportunities for backup, things of that nature, you know, utilizing services, you know, such as Grapevines, for that matter, you know, not having everything, you know, to Stephen's point, you know, about trying to create everything in-house and have it, you know, kind of a company system or what have you. Looking to see what other people do really good and latching onto that as part of your strategic IT structure rather than trying to redo everything in-house. And I think a good IT partner or managed service provider will educate you on those. And at the end of the day, they don't want to deal with problems either. So I think there is a huge opportunity there, both cost and time.
Likely, maybe if you use email as an example, you can run an Exchange server on premises, right? Which then you have to worry about backing it up and losing all the, or you can run your own sort of Exchange server in someone else's, you know, infrastructure, like Rackspace or something, right? Or you can just let Microsoft deal with it, in which case you don't need to worry about backups. They're guaranteeing it, right?
That's exactly, yeah. That's exactly where we're trying to work towards. Is the less we have to manage, the easier it ultimately is.
Yeah, it's if you're able to offload the risk of failure to somebody else, and someone else who they have a game plan for when something fails to fix it and fix it quickly. It's going to be a better situation. If they know how to if they know what's wrong and they've experienced this failure before, they can probably fix it a lot faster than you trying to figure out what happened and fix it on your own, on your side.
They might have better success against the Russian hackers too than you would on your own.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, I'd like to throw a little historic perspective on this. The 20th century saw the rise of the so-called modern industrialization, where, you know, Ford is credited with introducing the assembly line. You know, these days you have the so-called gig economy with, you know, Uber and all sorts of crowdsourcing sites. What's happening, and what a lot of people have seen in very large organizations, is you want to spend as much time doing what you're not only good at, but what provides the most value. So I think it was Tim who said that, you know, we're in the business of making wine, you know. Here on Drinks Technology, we're in the business of providing IT, you know. And when you have a compatible relationship like that, both people are doing exactly what they're really good at. There's always reasons to kind of pull back and push forward on those things, but at Drinks Technology, we host our mail on Microsoft. I mean, we don't deal with any of that. We pay Microsoft a little bit of extra money, so it's backed up more or less forever, and that's them doing what they're really good at. I tell my wife all the time that I'm not very good at fixing stuff in the house. That's why I'm going to pay someone to do it, because they're really good at it. And that's the value of all this. I think everyone's touched upon this relationship, and a few times I heard that no one gets in the business to be the IT person except me. I didn't get into business to be the accountant, so I have someone doing that. And we're lucky that especially these days with technology facilitating so much of this, you could reach out to people pretty easily. You don't need your IT company literally next door. Of course it helps. You don't need your lawyer next door. You don't need grapevines next door. Everything can be done digitally, and it's really great, because as this starts breaking down smaller and smaller, you can get people that can do very tiny things extremely well, which previously was only really afforded to very wealthy organizations that could hire one person to do one little thing.
Or make large capital investments in infrastructure. And
yeah, I mean, not everybody is JP Morgan that can afford 350 developers to be working on one system.
With the advent of Google Docs, Dropbox, what have you, we question the validity of our server, our big server that cost us in excess of $10,000 once all the licenses and everything are put on it, and it's installed and hooked up. Really, is that the last one we ever have to buy? And we're actually hoping the answer is yes to that. But that's the area I think we're having the right education from partner in this really helps, where you can understand where technology is going, so you don't have to really be an expert in it yourself.
I think both Andre and I would both tell you that is absolutely the last one you should ever buy.
Yes.
And it's even
That's why I'm partaking in this panel. I need free advice.
Yeah, it's even debatable, should you even continue to own it like now, even though you cost, because it is, file sharing and email are both so critical to the business, so prone to hacking, data loss, backups, data sprawl. Just the issues are endless and thankless, and people will do it for you for nothing. Like, Andre uses Microsoft, our company uses Google, Gmail, including file sharing, Google Drive is $50 a year a user. Like, how do you beat that?
And you get a company where they're in Google, where their entire image is based on, in that sense for Google Docs, reliability. I mean, there was a time where Google was a little bit intermittent, maybe 5 years ago, and they felt that heat. And like John was saying, you get it for practically nothing. I mean, $50 per year. Tell me something that provides more value than that for $50 a year.
Yeah, it's shocking. And Microsoft has done a lot to compete. So, and the Microsoft solution, a little bit more expensive, but you get to keep the traditional, Excel, PowerPoint. So, yeah.
Part of it is comfort, though, on that.
We'll do it. Tell you what, guys, we're a little over time. We'll do a whole nother webinar on Andre and John tell Tim what to do.
Yes. I like that.
I'll log into that one all day.
Yeah. You're buying the beer.
Absolutely. I'll bring the wine. How about that?
Perfect. Even better. Particularly if it's your company's wine, we're in.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we have no other questions, and we're a bit long, so I think it's probably appropriate. We thank each of you gentlemen for participating. Terrific job, and thanks a lot.
Yeah,
and
thanks for
to our
having us.
audience.